Morning, and thank you for joining me. So, what are we going to focus on today? Today is all about closing the strategy execution gap in 2026. Do you realize that we're just over 12% of the way through the year? Amazing, isn't it? 12%. And the question really in our mind is, what have we learned from the last 12% about the execution of our strategy? So I'm just going to explain a little bit about the Go.M.A.D methodology, myself, and then we're going to get in and we are going to discover 7 hidden gaps. Do a little self-assessment. But before we do that, I should explain a couple of things. Firstly, Go.M.A.D stands for Go Make a Difference. It is a rallying call for change, improvement, acceleration. It's not about staying the same. So you'll see here our purpose. And what we basically do is help leaders and teams to execute strategy by getting them to think differently so that they can accelerate the performance. And what we do is we guarantee that when we work with clients, they always get measurable results, or else we keep working with them. So how does the magic happen? Well, the magic happens because we get leaders working on real business issues in real time. So they benefit from the leadership development and business improvement. And we issue improvement challenges, which we then measure. And I'll explain a little bit more about that as we go through. Something really important to understand, though, is the relationship between our actions and our results. Now, if we're talking about the strategy execution, we've obviously defined what our strategy is, what the results are that we're looking for, but sometimes people go round and round in a loop. And I'm sure you're familiar with who said that. Albert Einstein, good old Uncle Albert, said, you know, if we carry on doing the same sort of things, we're going to get the same sort of results. So how do we break that pattern? And what we do is we break it by saying we've got to get people to think differently. If people think differently, they will have different ideas, different questions in their mind. They will find different answers. They will involve different people. And that's what we do, is to stimulate that thinking and then work in improvement cycles with them. A few things that you need to know about me. I have the title of Chief Thinking Engineer. In our consultancy, we don't call people consultants. Their job is to engineer thinking, right? And I guess what I'm best known for is really as a researcher and researching the framework that has been used around the world in probably getting on 500 companies now. And this is what we call the results framework. That research was originally done in 1997, 1998. And then I published my first book, which was The Art of Making a Difference, here, in 1999. And that became a bestseller, about 300,000 copies of that now in print. Following that, I wrote a book about coaching, leadership, transformation. And what I like to do is make things very practical. So if you haven't watched my TEDx talk, if you go to the bottom of our webpage, our homepage, you'll see a 17-minute TEDx talk where I explain those 7 key principles of making a difference. So when a person goes from point A to point B, they achieve something. And I'll share a little bit about that later in the context of strategy execution. I'm a designer, a creator. That's what I spend most of my time doing. And that could be designing large-scale change programs. It could be designing an AI-enabled app to enable people to think differently. So designing, creating is what I absolutely love doing. And then the other thing is being a solution-focused pragmatist. The key thing that I love doing is finding stuff that works and packaging it in a way. It could be, for example, a pack of cards that we give people. I can remember vividly working with a global insurance business where we gave them the pack of cards and the CEO was waving the 10 of diamonds, going, Andy, we've got to use this card. So it can just stimulate people's thinking. And when they have a light bulb moment, that is when they get clarity, or it could be fresh thinking, fresh ideas. That's when it pays off, because you know then you've affected the thinking. And if we put it into a challenge, that thinking will turn into action, that action will turn into results. So get strapped in. Here we go for the next 45 minutes. We are going to look at 4 main areas. We're going to look at leadership responsibility for that, and I'm going to share with you a framework to do that. Then we're going to look at the 7 hidden gaps, and we're going to do a little assessment of those as we go on at the start and at the end, and then we'll look at doing something about it. So if you've got questions, by the way, at any stage, please put your questions not into chat but into the Q&A. Okay, I might ask a few things as we go through to put into the chat, but actually if you've got any questions, they'll pop up in front of me, and I'll do my best to answer those questions either during the session, or you'll get a personal response afterwards. Okay, so let's do a little poll here. Let's launch this. So what best describes the current state at the moment? This is about your organization's strategy. Is it clear? Not so clear? Maybe you're currently developing one, or maybe it's stuck in a drawer. I've had 2 people this year, directors, actually tell me, yeah, our strategy, we've done, it's stuck in a drawer, and people have just got their heads down carrying on as normal. So please just vote for that. Okay, I normally wait for when 80% of people have voted, just in case they might have popped out for a quick cuppa or something. Great. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll there. We've got well over 80%, and I'm going to tell you the results. We have, oh, actually, let me just share those with you. Okay. Clear strategy exists and leaders are on track. Fantastic. Okay. So for you, it might be that I'm going to reveal some hidden stuff that might come along a little bit later. 63% of people, clear strategy exists, but execution is inconsistent or slow. Great, you're in the right place. 25% currently developing a new strategy. Okay, this for you then will be later, things to bear in mind. And there's no strategy in drawers. Fantastic. Okay, let's just go back. Okay, so I think one key thing to share is that organizations don't fail on strategy very often. All right, that's mainly been well thought through. It's the execution of the strategy, and particularly the engagement of people in that strategy, that basically causes the failure. So I'm going to introduce you to now one of the M.A.D frameworks, Go Make a Difference leadership framework. And when we work with executive and as senior leadership teams, I go through this with them just as a thought provoker. So for today, I'm going to invite you just to allow your thoughts to be provoked, capture down any ideas or light bulb moments that you have. So leadership responsibility. If I was to go into your organization, I might ask a question: what does leadership responsibility mean? And really what I'm looking to do is find out, to what extent are people on the same page? Are they aligned with the way they're thinking? Have you got a set of ground rules? Are there weak links in that leadership team that we need to do something about? So any one of these 6 areas here, let me just get my laser pointer going. Any one of these 6 areas that we're going to cover, they're interrelated, as you can see by the links, we might possibly need to take action on. So think of this as a diagnostic framework. Okay? Assuming that you've got a solid leadership alignment there, how aligned are you on the vision and the objective? So this is what that little poll was about. Really just saying, have we got a clear strategy a sense of direction, and if challenged, could we all communicate that? And not just communicate where we're going, but also communicate why we're going there. So, for example, if I was a new recruit in your organization and it was my first day of induction during my first week there, and you were the leader, welcome me on board, would you be able to give with clarity where we're going and why in a simple way that I could understand instantly, go home and share with my wife when she asked me how my first week of work had gone, so she can understand it? That's the real measure there. If not, we might need to take action and make sure you're on the same page. I'm going to share with you a little bit later in one of the 7 gaps an example that happened where there was mass misalignment over the sharing of this vision. Okay. Let's look at the next one. Culture. People, the way people think manifests itself in the way that they act and their behaviors. That collectively is your culture. So is your culture currently aligned and going to enable you to achieve that vision, or is your culture going to hinder your progress? What's your responsibility as a leader? Well, if it's the latter and it's hindering the progress, your responsibility is to do something about it. So, just again, thought-provoking for yourself, is that an area that you need to work on? 5th area here then is the quality of your manager's thinking and planning. And this is where our main methodology, the M.A.D results framework, comes in as a very handy, useful toolkit to enable them to think through in 60, 90-day improvement cycles and plan the execution of that strategy in line with the vision and where you're going. So what's the quality of that? And what's your responsibility as a leader? Do you need to really kickstart that going? Certainly when we run our 60 and 90-day challenges, we always get a member of the exec, the senior leadership team, to come in right at the start as the sponsor to issue the challenge and engage and empower people to say, right, you have the opportunity to make a difference in the next 60 or 90 days. I'm here as a sponsor. If you have any challenges, please let me know. You're going to learn about involving others and various other key thinking principles here. I am one of those others. And then we bring the sponsor back at the end of those 60 or 90 days to receive the presentation of the measurable results. Okay, people. Involving others is a key success principle. So in a context of an organization here, the managers are going to be thinking and planning, how can I possibly engage my people? And that might not just be your employees, it might be your supply chain, it might be your patients, your customers, but also, are those people in tune with where you're going? Has that vision been communicated in the most appropriate way, in the right sort of language for different people so that it lands? If not, you've got a responsibility. Your responsibility as leader is to share with the people where we're going and engage them. Now, if you do all of those things and the managers are thinking and planning, engaged in improvement challenges, the people are engaged in those as well, you've got absolute clarity where we're going, we're all aligned on the same page, leaders taking responsibility, do you think the culture might shift? Yeah, well, absolutely. So we just need to check it. We just need to check, how we're doing on that culture shift, and critically, can you be bothered to go on the journey? That's it. So if you've got any questions about anything that I've just covered there, let me just put that back up again. If you've got any questions about that, that was a quick whiz through that normally takes half a day with an exec team doing the assessment. Please put the questions in the Q&A for me. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to spend about 15 minutes or so looking through these 7 hidden execution gaps. So the research that we've been doing over the years is to say, If you've got a clear strategy, clear vision, defined goals, how come it doesn't always work? So I'm going to reveal these 7 to you, and then we're going to go through and spend a minute or two on each one in a little bit more depth. So here's a quick overview. And as you go through this, I'm just going to invite you to think, is that a possible one for me and my team to explore? So a little bit of gap analysis here. Okay, first one, thinking and decision making. Okay, is that for you? Or what about leadership and ownership? Communication and engagement? Capability and systems? I mean, gaps starting to emerge there. Maybe they're structural gaps, process gaps. Maybe they're cultural and psychological. Or maybe it's to do with measurement and feedback. Okay, so I've got 7 things on there. Just have a little read of those descriptions, and I'm going to invite you now into chat just to put down which one that you believe at the moment is top for you in your organization. Okay, just put in the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7, and we'll see if there's a little bit of a pattern or a trend for everyone that's on here today. So this is just my curiosity. We're going to deep dive these a little bit later, and then as we go through those, I'm going to encourage you to assess those. So in 15 minutes time, you'll have a much better assessment, but it will just be interesting to contrast what we've got. So at the moment, I won't read out people's names. We've got a cross variety between 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, accountability, intent getting lost, 4 and 5. And a 6 has just come in. Okay, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, so just hold that in your mind. I'm going to go through each one now in a little bit of depth. This would, by the way, what I'm going to do in 15 minutes would normally take pretty much a whole day if I was working with an executive team. And I'm going to go through 29 sub-factors here. All right, let's get going. Pens at the ready. Thinking and decision-making gaps. Okay, so let's have a look at the reasons why these exist, and I'll give you some examples as we go through. First thing is flawed assumptions. Strategies are built on outdated, incomplete, or untested premises. Okay, so what assumptions might be made that have gone in to that strategy that haven't really been thought through? I'm going to click through 2 actually, because the C one has created just a thought in my mind that I want to share with you. So unclear logic change. Let's do that first. Leaders can't explain the causal links between strategy and outcomes, right? What people that are lower down in the organization and maybe multiple stakeholders really want to know is the reasoning for this, right? They want to know that this has been thought through, and they can see that the activities and the outcomes they're working on are related to the strategy. And so many times in organizations, I see people working on things that you've got to question, how is that relevant to the strategy? And sometimes we get close to working with them on shop floor, they can't really explain that. So therefore, maybe there's a gap there. We'll look at communications a bit later. But C, the over-optimism bias, assuming capability, resources, or market response that isn't there. And the one that goes through my mind clearly here is a big law firm talking to a couple of people there, and these were in central services, and one was a partner. And the assumption that had been made was that AI, they know that it's going to impact their sector, but they've been slow in getting a strategy together on it. And what's actually happening now is that clients are coming into them, having used ChatGPT, various other AI agents to do some of that legal work, and they're bringing in draft documents and sending it and say, look, I'm expecting you to charge me less because I've done some of the work already and AI is making this easy. And if you know anything about the way law firms work, they work on mainly 6-minute billing blocks. And therefore, naturally, customers, I'm using this myself. I'm actually using this to draw up draft legal documents and therefore saving that. So they haven't thought this through about, and there's massive assumptions being made there about people's ability to change, the way they work. Full prioritization. Everything feels important. I've seen this so many times. People may be feeling a bit overwhelmed on that as well. And the last one is cognitive fragmentation. This is where leaders interpret things in different ways. Mentally, they've read it. They go, I think I understand this, but actually, I haven't checked it out with the other leaders there. So have a think through that. Which ones of those are most relevant to you, to your organization? Let's move on to the next one. Leadership and ownership. Okay, this is all about accountability and alignment slip. So let's look at 4 key reasons why this happens. Misalignment in the leadership team. Touched a little bit about that on that leadership framework there. And this is where they have a lack of a shared mental model for execution. They haven't got a way of thinking things through, planning it of how we are going to execute this. They've done the plan, but they haven't planned the execution. Delegated ownership. Sometimes responsibility is abdicated once the strategy is done, it's signed off, and sometimes forgotten about. That's the bottom drawer syndrome. Fear of accountability. Activity, busy, 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 over results to avoid scrutiny. So this one here is mergers and acquisitions. 3 of my clients at the moment are going through mergers. And I'm seeing this, a lot of activity happening, but not necessarily the results coming through that they need at the moment. And there's a lot of competing demands happening. And I was working with a local authority just before Christmas on a 60-day challenge there in special measures. And this was their real big thing. And they were talking about how people lower down in the organization, they had so much to deal with that there wasn't follow through and the new strategy, wasn't landing. So ownership can sometimes, you might have heard of the phrase, the sticky middle, where the middle management don't translate things downwards. Could be happening here. Let's move on to the third one, communication and engagement. Okay. So this is about where the intent gets lost in translation. So lost in translation, a message, basically the strategy never lands in a format. Remember I talked about the involving others and the people that they can act on. It's written in too much high-level language and hasn't been translated enough. Here we might have the sticky middle that are not bought into it. Maybe they're afraid to challenge, and we'll look at cultural issues a little bit later. Or they can't interpret the strategy at a local level. It's written at maybe the higher level, and there's not been that translation done for them. Maybe, right, we've done the strategy, we've done the big launch, that's it, and there's not the continuous return to it and repetition and engagement with it. And this last one is very interesting because in a large organizations, inevitably you're going to get silos, you're going to get directorates, you're going to get divisions, you're going to get functions. It's interesting as an outsider coming in and listening to the stories that are being told, and very often how few stories are told about other parts of the organization. And what I like to do is to engage people and cross-fertilize across the organization, certainly when we're working with 60 and 90-day challenges, getting people from different functions, different areas, working on things that are maybe not so familiar with them, but they can make a massive contribution to. Then, of course, they have a story that they can share and tell that they've been part of. And one of the types of leadership stories that are commonly told is not just who I am as a leader, it's who we are as leaders. The third type is where we're going, which is the visioning story. But the who we are, actually getting those stories about other parts of the organization, so important and very often gets missed. So just have a look at those. Which of these are resonating for you? Let's move on quickly, conscious of time. So we're going to look at capability and systems, a shared way of working, okay? So no execution framework. Let's plan, do that. You know that we're big fans of 60 and 90-day. That's our execution system that we use here. Underdeveloped change leadership skills. One of my most popular books in the last 2 years has been this one, How to Save Time and Money by Managing Organizational Change Effectively. And it's very thin. It's only got about 70 pages, but that's everything that a line manager and a leader needs to know about the people side of change. And that could be a gap, okay? Sometimes it's over-reliance on tools and technology, assuming that software is going to fix behavioral issues. And it won't necessarily. We've got to get in there and think, what do we need? Maybe it's missing feedback loops, data. A fantastic example we had in the second peak of COVID. A client came to us, NHS Trust, and said, our e-rostering system is broken. Help. We can't get enough nurses onto wards. It's costing us a fortune in expensive agency staff. What can you do? And we said, well, actually, we're going to ask you to do something so counterintuitive that every bone in your body is going to shout no. And that is, we need to take your people, your ward managers out for 2 days in order that they can think, okay? We're going to give them that common execution framework so that they can go fix the e-rostering system. And over a course of 90 days, they not only did that, they saved £750,000, and there was a ripple effect there of how they were getting other people to think differently as well, because they had a shared thinking framework and a way of acting. Let's move on to structural and process. Okay, what are these gaps about? These are about when strategy and operations run on different tracks. And the strategy, great, we've written it, it's there, but we carry on with what we've been doing. So sometimes the annual objectives from last time, they're no longer relevant to the strategic intent that we've just defined. And I think about 25% of the people on today's session are still in the developing strategy mode. So what you've got to be careful of is when that's launched, what are the new objectives linked to that? Overcomplicated governance. 14 levels of procurement, all right, with 3 levels for under £200 sign off. Oh, I think we might have a bit of a gap here in terms of efficiency. Absolutely. So let's have a look at a couple of other things that might happen here. Incentives misaligned. So we're rewarding one thing that is not reflected in our strategy. So rather than rewarding the overall organization success, it's very local. And again, that can cause some conflict. Short-termism, looking at the quarterly results, depending on what sort of organization you work in, at the expense of maybe long-term strategic progress. And I get it, if you're a firm that's, a FTSE 100 having to report into the city on a quarterly basis, yeah, that could happen, that short-termism. But we know that there needs to be some structural put in place so we can achieve the long-term vision. Number 6, let's look at the strategy execution gaps to do with what are cultural and psychological gaps. This is when beliefs, behavior don't match the ambitions. We talked about the collective beliefs in people's heads, how they manifest themselves in terms of behavior, but that is holding back the vision of where we're going. Maybe there's change fatigue. Maybe people are just overloaded and more initiatives that are just competing for their attention. It could be that they don't see that the strategy is achievable. If we're saying, we need to get to Mars, but we need to pull back and go for the moon, why? Maybe it's about achievability. They might think, actually, this is not relevant to me, this big strategy thing. I'm going to keep at my localized level. Maybe they're comfortable with the status quo. It causes effort to change, and some people don't want to change. So what's going on in their heads to keep it the way it is rather than have that innovation growth mindset there? It might be because there is low psychological safety in either that function or the organization, and they don't challenge the flawed decision making or raise red flags. It's here's our strategy, just adopt it. So hopefully that's given you some food for thought on that one. I don't know if we've got time for a little example, working with some further education and higher education organizations at the moment. One leader in an organization described their culture to me as a cross between the Wild West and a holiday camp, where people had been allowed to do their own things, having fun, but maybe in a bit of a dangerous way. So sometimes the use of metaphors can actually reveal these cultural and psychological gaps. Right, final one, number 7, then we're going to do some assessment. We'll have, if any of these, by the way, are stimulating questions for you, please just type in the question and I will answer them at the end. Right, number 7 then, measurement and feedback. And this is where perhaps we're tracking the wrong results. Maybe we're tracking activities, but not impact. So, let me give you a couple of examples of this. I was talking to an HRD recently, HR director, and he actually shared with me the 5-year people plan that had just been signed off by the executive team. I'm very, very proud of it. And I was looking for commonalities and how I could assist. And I noticed that one of the measures was actually about the percentage of people that were engaged. How was that measured? Well, it was measured by the amount of PDRs, performance development reviews, that had been completed. Nothing to do with the quality of them. It was just the number that had been completed, right? Now, are they really measuring the right thing? I would much rather have 60% completed, but there was an amazing, robust conversation around it, than have 90% completed and it was a really poor conversation. So are we actually measuring the right things here, the impact? Maybe it's the frequency of measurement, that by the time problems surface, it's too late. As I said, 12% through the year, okay? What is surfacing? How often are these gaps reviewed? Monthly, bi-monthly? Some of these things you might not see on a risk register. Well, what about where metrics, we've got metrics, but maybe they're the wrong metrics. Maybe they're not connected to the new strategy, but it's just a habit, culturally maybe, that we've always measured these same things. Maybe we didn't achieve success last year, maybe we're off target, maybe we're not having as many learning reviews at that leadership level that we need to. So again, just thought provokers. These are all reasons why gaps can occur. So, as well as what questions have you got, we're now going to look back at the summary of those 7 areas. And I'm going to invite you to consider which of these, now we've gone into them in a little more depth about the causes and the reasons behind them, which of those have you identified as the most important? So, let's go for a poll. I'm going to launch that. You've got all 7 and you can vote for as many as you want this time. Okay. Have a look at those. Which of those 7, it might just be one, might just be a couple. Which of those do you think? Just wait for a few more people. 67% have participated so far. Let's get a few of those up. Rather than put them into chat, sorry, I can see some people putting them into chat. If you can just vote on the poll on this one, that would be great. Okay, we've got over 80%. Let's end the poll here. And oh wow, 2/3 of people are saying number 2, leadership and ownership gap. Let me just share those results. A similar amount for number 3, the communication. 50% capability, the systems gaps, structural and process, bit of cultural stuff happening. Not so much on the measurement and not so much on the decision making there. Okay, let's get rid of that. Stop sharing. Back. Okay. So what can we do about closing the gaps? A missing piece that we use is the shared thinking framework. Okay, and this is what we engage people in doing when they're working through those gaps. And I'm going to give you this in the context of strategy execution. So this is the model that was done through about 4,000 hours of research going back to 1998, 1999. Myself and 7 other researchers spent about 4,000 hours interviewing people to come up with these 7 key principles. So let's look at these in the context of strategy. What's our reason why for this? Well, the answer is we've got a gap. Okay, our strategy is not being executed as we want to. That's our driving reason why, and there might be cost and efficiency linked with that. So what are our success measures? What would closing the gap actually look like? Let's get really quantifiable on that. Next one, we need to consider people's self-belief. All right, we looked at that as one of the areas there about the psychological impact. If people don't believe those are achievable, it's not going to work. Okay. Next 2 weeks' time, I'm working with 40 leaders in an organization, and they've got to close a gap that's emerged of over 20 million, in the last few months. And that's what we're focused on, 20 million. How do we close that gap? So let's look then. Once we've got clarity, we know what we want, why we want it, we've got the self-belief, at least a 6 out of 10 that we can achieve it. We need to look at a bank of questions, high quality questions, to think this through. We have 10 possibility areas, including the risks, the assumptions, the obstacles. Get that? 4 of those areas are about people to involve. Okay. We need to sort out from all of those about what the most important priorities are in relation to our defined goal. And we need to think about who we're definitely going to involve beyond the possibilities into priorities. Who are we definitely going to involve in that? And then we're going to start thinking about how we're going to gain their buy-in. Now, they might be internal, they might be external stakeholders that we're thinking about there, and the key tasks that we want them to do rather than us. So this is all about building a really robust plan, and who's going to take responsibility for what. So accountability, assigning that into these project groups, and then we take action, we measure results in the next 60 or 90 days. That's going to give you a really robust workout of thinking. Okay, so questions, please put them in. I've got a couple of questions come in. Thank you for those. I'll answer those shortly. So that is our approach to strategy execution. Right, we've come into the end, 5 minutes to go. 4 options for you. Well, 5 actually. You can do nothing, or you could share the insights of this with your leadership team. What are you taking away from today about the gaps that you can take forward and start to take action with them. You can invite colleagues to the next breakfast session. I'm running similar session to this, same slides, maybe different examples, on exactly 2 weeks' time on the 27th of February. And you can join a strategy execution day. If you work in a large organization and you want to deep dive into this in much more than 15, 20 minutes of those, we can spend a whole day. And we've got a session coming up. I'll share the date with you in a second. Or if you need to move faster, just arrange a conversation with us on that. So just let us know your preference. If you're interested in a discovery day, just put DD into chat, and we'll do something. If you want an interesting conversation, just put a C for conversation, and we'll do that. So that's the date there. We'll send something out to you about that. That's the date for the strategy execution day. I'll be leading that. It's a day at our headquarters, inspirational place in the middle of a wood in the countryside in Leicestershire, and you can come to that. Right, what questions have you got that you would most like to get answers to? Okay, remember, if you're interested in the discovery day, we are limited on spaces on that to a maximum of 12 people. Just put DD in and we'll get in touch. Right, what questions have you got? I've got a question that's come in. How do you decide the difference between 60 and 90-day challenges? Good question, Kelly. So that is dependent on three things. Firstly, how fast do you want to move and get results? Secondly, culturally, what is acceptable in because some organizations, they are on a slow cycle, i.e. they're reporting every 90 days to the city, or their accountability performance review cycles. And also it's how quickly can you mobilize people. So, I got a phone call a week and a half ago from a CEO saying, help, we're over 20 million, got an execution gap of that. And I said, right, let's mobilize people. How many? Top 40 people in a room for 2 days, right? In 2 weeks' time, let's do it. Okay. I then asked the question, do you want 60 or 90? He actually said 30. I said, we'll make progress in 30, but culturally, your organization isn't ready for that. So we agreed it's going to actually be 60 to press the button. So it's a combination of those factors. Sometimes it can move fast, like retail can move a lot faster. If we're working in the NHS, it's 60 to 90 days because it takes time to release people. Privately owned businesses, we can go fast. So a multitude of things there. Okay, I am conscious of time. Questions come in. What is the biggest quick win you could recommend to increase team belief and confidence? Good question, Mike. That would be enabling people to master the skills of possibility thinking, so that within a space of 7 to 20 minutes, they will have breakthroughs in their thinking, new ideas that they can evaluate and prioritize that are relevant to their goal and plan. Okay. Once they've done that, they go that the belief shoots up. I never thought of that. Oh, so in other words, changing their thinking. That's my short answer on that one. Okay. Right. We're about at the end there. There is a long, complicated question that has come in, and I will reply to that person personally because it will take me longer than a couple of minutes. It's about cultural change and how do you go about a big organizational restructure. Here we go. Final question to leave you with. What difference will you make? Remember at the start I said, Go Mad is about go make a difference. It's a rallying call for change, improvement, and acceleration. The year will continue to go by, percent by percent by percent, and gaps will start to appear. Right? Take action as a result of this, and I wish you all the best. As my father always taught me to say, now go make a difference. And my mother always taught me to say, thank you for having me. If you enjoyed it, please tell others, and we'll send some info to you. If you want to put any feedback in the chat, please put that feedback now, and we'll be out of here in about 10 seconds time. Have a great day and catch you soon. Cheers.